Hello and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach Insider. My name is Ben.
And I'm Swiz.
And thank you for joining us. We are talking about Adelaide today, everyone. We are recording our team-by-team analysis that we usually do, trying to keep it nice and short and sharp. But before we go, this is a preseason for everyone. I need to do the socials. SC Insider 100 on Twitter, Facebook and Twitch. Also, you can search for a Supercoach Insider on YouTube. Thank you as well to the comments on YouTube, trying to get us to the 1,000 subscriptions, whoever that lovely person was. And as always, we always appreciate the community through Twitter and everywhere else as well. Swiz, how are you faring?
Yeah, good. Yeah, you're right. Thank you to all the people who shouted out. Some have found me on Twitter, Swiz26, and asked me to add them to different forums and stuff. So now we appreciate the questions. And if you can't find me, find Chris or Ben on our personal pages. But yeah, definitely at the Supercoach Insider YouTube or Twitter. And we're happy to have a conversation about footy. I actually had someone hit me on Twitter as well saying that you were mentioning about a really good group or something or other on, was that the Richmond forum or what was it? Yeah, so the Richmond Tigers Supercoach forum, which we have on Facebook, run by Abdul, does a great job of that. So I think we've got around 200 people on that at the moment. So, preferably Richmond supporters on that one, but each club should have their own, or there'll be some supporters out there if you're, keen super coaches. So yeah, definitely get involved. But no, I'm going well, Benny. Unfortunately cricket was called off today, so I sat there and watched the Rumble, and unfortunately that was pretty shit. And that I'm wearing my wrestling top, the What's Wrong with Wrestling Boys Don't Plug Other Podcasts shirt, which is very relevant because we're on a different podcast than that. So I'll let them know that I was wearing their shirt for this. But it's good to be back talking about these quick-fired pods and starting off with the Crows. Probably not the best team to start off with, but got to work through all 18 of them.
It's like, think back to previous years. It's kind of like we started off with, hey, everyone, North Melbourne, and that's it. So it is interesting. Dom Dunn as well, there's that question answered for you. So, okay, so let's talk about format. So we're looking at top 10 potential on the rise, so either on the rise in money or on the rise in average for both format purposes. Draft sleepers, the burn man, and rookies as well. So the idea is that we kind of give you some standards, some draft perspectives, and our thoughts on different people and where they might be coming up and down, and also those that we keep an eye on as well. Swiz, so Adelaide, let's have a look at their starting fixtures briefly. They have a couple of fairly good fantasy games for the first couple of rounds, but then they have a more difficult sort of run of 5. And even then, they don't really play Gold Coast or North until around that sort of bye round period anyway. So what are you thinking with the fixtures?
I think Adelaide could be the biggest trap for mid-prices this year. Fremantle and then the Pies in round 2. Even though Collingwood could beat them, they could score some good points in that game. And then they run into the showdown, the Bombers away, the Tigers and the Doggies at Mars. So, I think a few people might get a bit caught if, like last year, where Tex went bang, bang, there could be a situation where maybe a couple of their forwards get going early. I can see people running into a trap. Rookies are rookies, but you might see a potential, couple of spikes, and then they could be finding themselves out of the team the next couple of weeks. The only good thing is for their limited primos that, they do play Collingwood twice. They've got the Eagles, North Melbourne and Carlton. So more, I think, on the run home, if some people pick up dual position or get a, drop down in price, could be a potential, some good value there, and we always like value, Benny. So yeah, there could be a watch throughout the season, but as a starting, we'll wait and see.
So you're calling it the Texan trap is basically what you're calling it.
Definitely the Texan trap.
Oh, geez, yes, but you are right, and those first couple of games could be definitely appealing. I also believe Adelaide don't really get much of the pie anyway. So apart from a couple of, was it North Melbourne or Gold Coast they played, they got a bit of the pie.
Exactly. For those who don't know or new to Supercoach, Supercoach gives out 3,300 points per game. So you had Adelaide obviously only won 7 games last year, which included beating Melbourne and Geelong, which I don't think they'll do this year. But overall, they only took out 47% of the pie in those games. But in losses, they were down to a 45%. So that equates to around if you think you're dividing it in half, 1650. They're under 1,500 per game. So, that average per player is around that sort of 68, 69 points mark, where Adelaide are probably very appealing, especially when they're playing away. as for the opposition. So one definitely to look at if they're in you've got a captain option or a couple of captain options, and you're debating between two players. If they're playing the Crows and that game's at your player's home, jump on board them, because the Crows like to leak points.
Yeah, no, sounds like really good advice there. All right, so let's get into the top 10 potential. We can't go much further than Rory Laird, 632k midfielder only this year. Pretty much one of the only real saving lights for a lot of people last year from Adelaide. Absolutely killed it. I mean, he averaged 120 after round 5, so over that 17-round period. Also averaged 124 after the buys, and he was absolutely killing it. So we know Matt Crouch wasn't there, which could impact Laird, could impact, probably more, my opinion, would impact Keys. I think Keys has been very good in that aspect, and we'll get on to him. But Laird, he'll be low owned. I can't see many people jumping on him. Can he back it up as well? I know Chris was very big on him, and he killed it, played exceptionally well, and he could still play exceptionally well. But for standard, I think there's better value elsewhere, more consistent. For draft even, I don't even know if I want to pick him up in that first sort of, in draft, that first sort of 10. Surely I think Laird would slide to a late second or an early third even, possibly.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe second round pick, hopefully. You'd VC,
The only saving light I can see for Laird, if with Crouch coming back, if Sloane's plays a full season, or if they start rotating some of those kids through there, they could drop Laird back at half back, which if you picked him up later on, or if you got him at value in a draft, he might pick up dual position, hopefully early, or at least at round 12, which could make him a very appealing defender on the run home. But as a starting point up, you look at Laird's price, he's dearer than Merritt, Parrish, Ollie Wines, Petrarca. In drafts or in standard, you're taking these players before Laird. It's just brutal. That simple.
And that's nothing against Laird. I mean, second round, third round's brutal. I mean, the guy did average 120 for a lot of the season, and he is a very good player, but I wouldn't want him first round. I wouldn't want to be relying on him as a captain. And you're right, there's definitely value elsewhere with probably a little bit more potential. I do like him, though. It's one of those funny things where you wouldn't mind him as your VC option. I think he went 10 times over 120 plus, which is probably a big indicator that we look for in for draft leagues, is particularly VC options. And 120 plus, you're looking at a VC, and the more players in draft you have that can go 120 plus, the better your VC potential throughout the season. But yeah, for me, I think he did really well, but I don't know if he could back it up based on Matt Crouch coming in, etc. as well.
Exactly, and he's one of those players that, especially if the Crows aren't going to be in the game, from love the little sponsor there of Solo, mate. But if they're going to not be on the game on a scoreboard point of view, he could just run around, pick up possessions. No one's going to tag him, no problems, and he's going to score well. But as we said, Adelaide, I actually think, they win 7 last year. Some of those games, I don't think they're going to be as competitive. They could actually fall back and only be a 4 to 5 win team this year, which will impact he's scoring, the whole team scoring. So I think 120 comes down. He could be a 1-5, 110 guy, which is still great, and especially if he picks up defender status at some point, if he was to move back there. But with, as you said, Crouch coming back in, or if they start playing Schoenberg in there more, and that Dawson coming in will take some of those points. I don't see him able to back up the season that he had. Even if he still has a really good season, I just don't see him scoring those same points.
Yep, it might sound harsh as far as ladder predictions and that kind of thing, but the thing with Adelaide is we really need to see strong development from at least half a dozen players, 5. You need quite a big jump from quite a few people of their young talent in order for them to be super competitive. Pushing towards the 8 and actually winning more games than they're losing. So I do agree. I think they're a little bit off, and it's nothing against Adelaide. They went, they ran at the tilt for quite a long time, but now we need, they need these young players to jump up like a Sydney did. They came out of nowhere because everyone developed. So it's definitely in their scope, but I guess we'll wait and see.
Yeah, they were up there.
Jordan,
Yeah, they had their chance and they blew it against the mighty Tigers. So,
fuck! Can't believe I just let you plug that.
Oh, you had to, mate. But no, you're right. But I like what they've done with the drafting because they've actually gone after a lot of tools. Midfielders are easier to come in and have that impact straight away. So they've been trying to develop these tools. Your Fisher Mackeseys, your Worrells, Riley Thilthorpe that they've brought in. So they naturally take time. So I think that you see that regression before they're gonna, come back up the ladder again. But that's just footy, the circle of life in footy. Fair
enough. Jordan Dawson, 550k defender. 550k is probably around that mark, averaging the 100. He averaged 114 the last 9 rounds, so he did go really well, including a 141 and a 158. So that's why there's a bit of hype. Ceiling's definitely there. His role was there for Sydney. Had an exceptional year. The thing that everyone's like, oh, it's a one-hit wonder, but the back end of 2020, we actually had a look, and he averaged 99 for the last 7 rounds there as well. So realistically, now you're looking at about a 30-game sample, averaging about 100. So I think he's definitely worthwhile, but the big issue is that changing to the new club, the only thing that I'm sitting there thinking of could really work in his favour is he had a lot of metres gained. Right, for Sydney, he was one of the highest for the metres gained. So what could happen is Matt Crouch goes sideways, like he always does, and then they're like, oh, give it to Dawson. He'll go forwards, and maybe he'll get a lot of metres gained and a lot of points because we know Matt Crouch doesn't like to go forwards with the footy at all, does he? So it's going to be an interesting one. I can understand the hesitation. Would I be picking him at 100 and going 100 plus with the potential to go even further? It's possible. But I don't like to kind of go, oh, he's just gotten to this point and he's looking really good, but I'm not putting him in my standard team at this point in time. Draft, yes, but I'm not jumping at him at overs at 100. Like, where are you thinking? If he sits there and he's around the scope around 100 defender, I'd probably get him around 100 defender. Or if I could get him just after that, if I could get him at a 95 to 100, I'd get him. And there's so many good defenders this year in standard and even in draft. You don't have to kind of pick a guy like Dawson at a 100 average.
Well, there's
so many of them. There's a lot of them.
You got, like, if you're just looking at the standard, which, obviously runs your draft a little bit as well because you're looking at that points in order. But are you taking Dawson before Short, Ridley, Ryan, even Heppel, Sicily could go ahead of him because some people will buy into that hype and what he's done potentially before. So, yeah, you could have a situation if Dawson starts to slide, absolutely. But at the same time, if he's there and somebody's happy to reach for him, not a problem. Happy for somebody else to take him. My issue with Dawson this year is, firstly, I don't know what position he's going to play. Are they going to put him off his normal half-back or are they going to put him on a wing? So usually if clubs are willing to pay up and bring them in, they're looking at bringing them in as midfield time. We saw what happened with Zach Williams with that at Carlton. I'm not saying that that will happen to Dawson, but
they just brought in another midfielder for midfield time at Carlton. So
that's right. So you just don't know if these guys can actually translate to those positions and that, or do they move back to more where they're comfortable? The other thing, as you said before, it's give the ball to Dawson at Sydney. He was kicking the ball down to Buddy. Buddy most of the time will take that mark and that. This time, if he is on the wing and kicking the ball into the forward line, he's kicking it to a young Thilthorpe, Fogarty. They don't have the same impact up the forward the Crows do, what the Swans did. So a lot of those kicks are going to get intercepted, and instead of getting that 50-metre kick plus 4 inside 50, these could very easily be turnover kicks now, which will obviously affect his scoring. So. Yeah.
I think that's an understated fact. When it goes into the forward 50 line, number one, good teams, it's either contested, so they don't get outmarked as much, so that you get points or you don't lose points because it's still an effective kick. Weaker side, sometimes you see these young players, they sort of turn around and the opposition's just like, oh, that's fine, you run this way. I'm just going to stand here and mark the ball, because I don't know where the ball's coming in. It's a big one. And then you have goal assists, score assists, a whole range of things that actually goes with it if they take the mark and actually go back and hit a kick from anywhere from in that 50 zone at big points.
And that's why we talk about the pie, and Adelaide's pie was skewed last year too, because the 2 games against North Melbourne, I think they were about plus 900 over that, so average about plus 450 of their Supercoach points. So you take that out, their pie is quite low, so all of a sudden, Dawson might be racking them up, but those stats are a bit more ineffective compared to, at the Swans. And at the Swans, he's protected as well because, Lloyd and Mills, Kennedy, Parker, those sort of good guys running around where you can get effective stats. If it's just, especially Crouch, whose body's a bit unreliable, if it's just Dawson and Laird there with a lot of kids around, he handballs it to another kid or a kid handballs to him. Now he's under more pressure than what he was at Sydney, where those Swans would have protected and given you a lot more time and space to move the ball. So, I think there's too many question marks for me to want to even touch him in standard or draft.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely a wait and see, and I do wish him well. He's a player that I do like to watch, but can't always get what you like. Aaron Hall being the big case, so you'll see him named at various times. All right, let's move on. Riley O'Brien, Mr. Rob of the Ruck, 520k, very appealing because of number one, his price point. People they want a cheapie. They want someone who could be the top 2 or top 3 rucks. And the reason that people do get excited is because he did have 900s in 2021, but it's the ceiling. It's his potential that everyone looks at the potential and what he can do. He scored a 133, a 135, a 137, and a 147. And then we know in 2020, he absolutely went ham for about a good sort of, 5 or 6 game period where everyone's like, why do I even have Riley O'Brien on the bench? He's just absolutely killing it. Swiz, what do you think? Is it worth, when you look at the ruck structure, is there room for someone like Riley O'Brien, or is it if you're only extremely sentimental, should you consider it?
I personally don't mind it. Like, people were burnt by him last year and disappointed, so quite a few will jump off. But you had to remember that was really only his second season of footy. He plays sole ruck at Adelaide, and a lot of clubs are now doing that, playing either 2 rucks or they're flip-flopping their rucks. You look at Richmond with Nank and Soldo. GWS, you don't kind of know what they're doing each week. Melbourne now play Gawn, Jackson, so there's a lot of teams either playing a 2-ruck system or they kind of alternate their rucks. Geelong's another example of that. Adelaide, it's Riley O'Brien playing ruck and he gets a bit of a chop out. So there's that potential that most rucks, when they walk out in the field there and they're playing sole ruck, they're scoring 80 points. Riley O, that we've seen, has already shown that he's got the biggest tick in Supercoach. He can go big, as you've pointed out, Benny. So that's what I like to see if I'm taking a risk on someone or looking at one of those, pods, I want to know that they've got the potential to go big on any given week. And that also brings in as a vice captain option on those weeks too, especially in draft, which is fantastic. And I think in draft in particular, many people are going to pass on him, look at the other top rucks, and then just wait and stream, depending on especially on what sort of league you're in. If you're in a 10-team league, you go, okay, I can wait for rucks, no problems. And Riley O'Brien could be still sitting there in the 14th round, 15th round, and you go, absolutely, I'm happy to take even him in the 10th or 12th because you know what he can do. So there's no one coming in to push that spot. Riley Thilthorpe, he's going to play forward, pinch hit, but he's still, what's he in his second season? So, I don't mind the Riley O'Brien pick. I'm
big on him in draft. I think, again, same reason why people will probably jump extremely early on forwards and rucks because there's no forward stock. When you look how deep the defending line is, the top 20 defenders are scoring crazy well. Forwards, it drops off super quick. So I think forwards will be jumping early. Another strategy is you can even say like Timmy English, jump on him maybe slightly early, but throw him in your ruck line so everyone goes, hey, I'm not desperate for a ruck. I don't have to pick a ruck. And then if there's value that presents further down the line, the only thing I actually get upset with is I actually had Sean Darcy in a couple of my leagues last year and dumped him after a couple of rounds. The speculatives trying to get some extra potential, and when he went big, I obviously missed out. So I do like Riley O'Brien, particularly for draft leagues. For standard, for me, I think I'll pass. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think I've just got my mind set. And when your mind is set on who you want in your team, I think it's very hard to change your mind sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing is more for draft. Riley O'Brien starts with Darcy and Grundy. And then even live search in round 3. So he might have put in a couple poor scores to start the season, and somebody might be actually looking to offload him because they go, friggin' here we go again. But then, afterwards, Draper, Richmond Rucks, English, Bruce, Pitternet, from round sort of 4 onwards, he could have a really good big run there, and you can see he's going to, on his past history, he's going to have some games where he's going to go 140, 150. So definitely as a draft person, watch out. because there could be a couple itchy fingers, people wanting to trade off, and definitely could be a good time to jump on.
That's what I love, you Swiz. Who needs Chris with insight like that? Actually looking at ruck Chris, opponents. Definitely rusty. Very, very valid. Even more reason not to start him in standard with the couple of tough opponents early on, because you know if he shits the bed for the first, pardon the pun, the first 2 rounds, you're going to probably want to look to trade him to that ruck that's dominating anyway while you can, while it's not going to cost you. So I think that's definitely a valid consideration. Let's move on. Let's go on the rise. So we're looking at on the rise for dollars or on the rise in their average. They don't have many, but let's start with Miller. So Wayne Miller, number 1, defender, 271,000. Only played 2 games in the last 2 seasons. Never played more than 19 rounds, but still, I rated him last year before he got injured. I was tempted, and I still think he is a good enough player if he gets a good enough gig and a good enough go. Swiz.
All you need is Malira to play preferably up to the buys, but sort of 7-8 weeks. My problem is I don't think he can do that, because it's shown over his career that he really struggles to string games together. But yeah, if he has that halfback role and they have Dawson on the wing and Laird in the centre, he definitely can score points. Yeah, that is definitely not his problem. And if he can average sort of 70, 80, we know he's going to go up the value. Very, very good sort of that D4, D5 position in there in that price. But yeah, the issue is his body. And with the extra trade, some people will be going, yep, happy to take the risk. Personally, I think he's one of the burn men this year.
Ooh, okay. Maybe I had him in the wrong category. For me, it's very interesting because I think there's enough cheap options on a lot of the different lines this year that you don't really need to be going a mid-price defender. You look at, the forward line, you have Cornelio and you have a few others, Rayner. Midfield, you got Berries and your Hanna-Breeze. But no. Just in general, that price point, there's quite a few midfielders as well. Ruck, you have Bruce, you have Lynch. There's a lot of other cheap options this year, so you don't really need to go and actually get a cheaper defender, a D4 or D5 this year. And I think realistically, the only way I would actually start to look and consider that is if the rookies were extremely bad, which it doesn't look like they will be this year for defence. That would be the only way they would actually go, oh, geez, do I need someone like him at a D5 because the rookies are so bad for on-field purposes. But that's it. That's pretty much it. So we'll see how he goes. Apparently he's looking fairly fit, but they always say, oh, they're fit. It's like, oh, they're not match simulation, but they're fit. It's like, well, how fit are they then if they're not actually playing any match sim, mate? So we'll leave that one there. Next one for me is probably I think most of the standard relevance on the up-and-comers.
Well, they're definitely standard. And I guess this comes into a bit of a mix of a draft sleeper versus on the rise. And I don't mind Schoenberg in there. I think as long as he starts getting the role, I think Adelaide are committed to playing these kids. So he started to play in there last year. It looks good size about him, but as in a standard option at the moment, not. But it's one of those guys you just kind of track because, as we said, second half of the year, they do have some friendly games. And, starting at 390, no thanks. But if you say, let's say, first 3 or 4 games, they didn't have him in the midfield, drop down to that sort of 320 mark. And then, role change, you get a couple rookies who are up that price and you might go, well, here we go. This kid might be, they're going with him. He's there now, locked in that centre bounce, could become a good option. So I think it's one to track down the track because we're going into his 3rd season this year. But definitely as a draft sort of sleeper, as a mid, nobody's going to touch him. I think you could definitely put him on your bench, M7, M8, depending on how deep your draft goes. Because he had some scores last year. They had that 115, 96, 97, 95. It's 101 as well. So people aren't going to be thinking about Schoenberg. And you could pick him up, round 18, round 20 in your draft. And definitely one that could, really make a difference as your last midfield spot.
Well, I think that's officially the most minutes anyone's ever spent speaking about Schoenberg. What was it? Something you can track down the track. I mean, who needs the high highs and the low lows when you're coming up with stuff like that? And it just rhymed. For me, let's go into the draft sleepers. So I'm going to start with Rory Sloane. Again, you look at the quality of player he is. He's definitely a draft sleeper. He played 18 rounds this year, which is probably about 50% than he plays most other rounds. I think he went 22 games and 12 games, 22 games, 12 games, and I was like, he's going 22, but made 18. He actually started off very well. I think 2 out of the first 3 rounds, killed it, had the injury, came back, wasn't really playing inside as much. I think they took care of him a little bit. Had a couple of good games though, 800s, 3 scores of 119 or above, so it wasn't really a great year for Sloan, but he is someone who could slide and is someone that you could actually monitor or pick up. I think you could do a lot worse than having Rory Sloan in your draft team.
Yeah, and because of those injuries that he's had, a lot of people just kind of bypass him. Though a few people do have a real soft spot in him after the doco that came out a couple of years ago. You just couldn't not love Rory Sloan after watching that. And he's just one of those players you love to watch. Helped me about 3 seasons ago, I think, when I ranked in about top 200. I had him where a lot of people didn't and just killed it. So I do have a real soft spot for Rory, but it's definitely no for standard, but as a draft sleeper. Yeah,
where would you want him as your M? What do you think you would actually be? I'm actually happy with that. I'm okay with that.
It depends on your layout. Like a lot of mine, we play the 22 and it's sort of 7 midfielders in there. So yeah, if I got Rory Sloan sitting there like an M6 or something, fantastic. Even an M5, because he's got the potential to score really well. But that's that injury history that worries me. So I don't want him any earlier because I want my top 4 midfielders playing 20 games at least.
Yep. No, I agree. Next one, Matty Crouch. Obviously, we've touched on him already. He did average 110.6 in 2020. Also averaged 110.6, I think it was around that bats in 2017. He's pretty much pinched away at a low hundreds in between that sort of period. It's interesting because now his brother's gone. So that midfield could actually be his and Laird's to take hold. So he could be getting it, and the problem is Laird's so good at contested ball as well. So it's going to be one of those things where it wouldn't surprise me if Matt Crouch actually did come out and start doing fairly well. But that injury side of things, I think some people are either going to be super hyped up and jump early on a Crouch. I'm not jumping super early on a Crouch. Like if I picked him up at a low 100 average, you might kind of take a pinch. But Swiz, what do you think? Are you think people are going to start jumping out for this kind of guy? Or
I've seen some people starting him in their standard side. I've listened to Bomfer the other day. Don't know how he's Bomfer the Express because I'm the train man, but so I'll take that off him. Just shots fired already, Bomf. But I know he was huge on him. I think he's saying he's about going 120. But yeah, Crouch always has this issue of starting slow and working the season. Coming back from his injury, he will start slow. I can't. No, actually, I will have a crack at people starting him in the standard side because, he does see a lot of the ball and he comes home like an absolute steam train. But to start off with, I wouldn't go anywhere near the guy. Even if he went up and went up in value and had some really good games to start the season, just pay the extra like 30, 40 if you really wanted to jump on him. I'd just be leaving him alone. And from a draft point of view, again, I think there'll be some people in leagues who will jump on this guy early because they know his scoring potential and think, he'll rack up. But I have him he's my other burn man. Like, I don't want to touch somebody who, that we know that both Crouches, their injury history, and I don't want to bar of either of them.
Yeah, fair enough. Speaking of the Bomps, he had Rayner talking about how good Rayner is. And I was like, okay. And then he put the Lions in the bottom 6. And I was like, well, if the Lions are bottom 6, Rayner's not going to be a good player because he won't get any fucking midfield time if they are losing. I can tell you this now.
I heard that.
So if Rayner's killing it...
I hope you were listening to that, Benny. I was pissing myself so hard.
I was like, if Rayner's killing it, right, and he's going to be killing it, then they won't be a bottom 6 team because the only way Rayner's going to do well is if he gets a good amount of midfield time and kicks goals. So they're kind of tied in together. Rayner doing well and Lions success. They're kind of on the same train. At the same station.
Hates the Lions and that.
At the same time.
Thought it was a piss of the way he summarised you guys. But anyway, moving on. My guy, I really like Tommy Doedee. Intercept marks, some of his games. He's super consistent.
Seventh in the comp for intercepts.
Yeah, exactly. 111, 114, 111, 113, 101 and 114. And then there was quite a few 90s in there as well. So the guy just scores points. He sees a lot of ball. leads the charge down there for the Crows and that. So, and the young defenders also look out for him too if he isn't the one to intercept to move the ball out. So nobody's going to touch him in draft. That it's just one of those things because you look at his price and those people averaging at that same point, and they're just going to go for, unless you're got Adelaide supporters in your league, others are going to bypass Doedee. Like you're looking at that same, you got your Darcy Moores, you got Zach Williams, Giav, Blissarves. He did have Bose until he went down. So the Lukosius, so they're all the ones around that same price or that same point value as Doedee. So people are going to be looking, going, oh, hang on, I'm up to my second or my third defender. And that, or I see Doedee there, but there's all these other flashy names that I know or I like and that, and you might, you just watch him slide. But obviously it's one of those ones you don't want to slide too far. But even like it's a D2, I'd be happy with him at D2. But there's possibility.
That's a stretch.
But
Look,
there's a possibility that if D3, no problems, pick him up, 10th, 12th round. I've got no issue with it.
So he had 6 scores under 67 or 67 or less. He does have the potential to be more than an 85, which is why I do think he has potential for draft. Another one, so touching on Ben Keys, so basically, real brief, he had the 3rd highest meters gains for the Crows. He had 6 tackles on average a game. I think he's been exceptional for the Crows. But again, when you look at Matt Crouch and others coming in, for me, I'm not going to call him a burn man because I think he's actually earned his right. However, I think he will probably be a little bit more overrated, so I won't be picking him up at a 102.9 average. He had 10 scores under 100 already last year. I think that will probably increase, so I think pass on the Ben Keys. And Brodie Smith, I think just draft relevance, just a shout out for an 80 average. I think you know what you get, and if you had him at a D5, you'd be like, cool, or a bench player, cool. Brodie Smith is someone you expect.
And when I talk about Doedee, like D2, because I play in larger leagues, which sometimes I've got 15, 14, 16 players. So that's why when I say D2, that's kind of what I mean. But I know a lot of normal draft leagues are 10 to 12. So yeah, Doedee.
Anytime we talk about draft rankings,
so we probably should be saying that and that. So
it's
a
22 league.
Yeah, it is. So that's just my bad because I play in some large team leagues and that. But definitely Brodie Smith. If you could get him as your D5 or your bench, absolutely.
Burn man. Apart from Tex Walker, who I don't think should be touched in many of the formats. Maybe in draft if you're desperate enough, I guess. But enough said. Tex Walker. Haitley, 188k mid. I think he's a burn man, Swiz. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. We saw enough last year. If he didn't get games last year, with Crouch not in that side, he's not getting games this year.
He would have to have a big pre-season with an exceptional jump to actually start forcing his way in. I think he'd have to knock out Schoenberg and Keys to kind of actually have a crack.
Oh, if he had a massive season, I could see him playing the midfield in the Adelaide seconds.
Yeah, he could do. All right, let's get on these rookies and we'll touch on them briefly. One I was keen on, Fisher McCasey, 160k defender, but had a stress fracture in his lower leg, so I think he should be only returning to training around now, so that rules him out for starting him in standard, at least until you probably get that 2-game sample or see how he goes extremely close to the time. But he signed a 2-year contract, so I know they like him. He has enough talent. He's slightly more expensive, so you're probably trying to avoid it where possible. But considering the injury, I'd watch for him. Luke Pedler as well, 123k forward mid, debuted last season. He did have a shoulder reconstruction in August, September, depending on when they had surgery. Signed a 2-year contract extension in September as well, so he is one that I'm looking. He already debuted, so you know he's good enough to debut. He's 123k, so again, another person that you can watch with that dual swing forward mid. I think it's forward mid, yep. So they're the ones that I'm looking at. And I'm big on trying to look for people that have been in the system for a couple of years because they've trained, they've lifted, they're doing the running and everything else to handle it at that level. Generally, they get a bit more experience in the seconds with bigger bodies and the rest of it to try and get them ready. Whereas you don't see too many draft players, rookie players just drafted that are fit enough, strong enough, and ready enough to actually score and score well, unless their role is extremely specific for them. So they're the ones that we're looking at. That's why your Warners, etc., were successful last year because they were in the system, and that's what I love to look for. I'll add
on to that about Pedler, especially because I see some early teams on Josh Shelley because how high he went, and definitely carved up the under-18s when he sort of played. But I would rather Pedler in that role. He's already played the couple of games, as you said. One of them's sub-affected, so that's why he's still at such a cheap price. He's got that potential to be the one they go to early as that small forward, and so I've got more trust in him. The other one I'm really big on is Josh Worrell, especially with Fisher out. Defender forward, but been playing defence. Can definitely see him taking that role early on.
Worrell is definitely big on the alcohol reading too.
Well, they've lost Kelly
Silly
now
man.
to North Melbourne, so they've got that extra defence spot. So it's now or never if they're going to play Worrell. He's been in the system, 3 years, and some of his DT
Well, he was drafted as a forward too. He was the leading kicker.
He was actually a
for Vic
swingman,
Metro, wasn't he?
drafted as a swingman. So, but they've sort of settled him back. But yeah, and I know it's hard with trying to get with the Sandful scores and that, but some of these scores are actually quite good, like 80, 79, 90, 85, another 85, 85, 91. So it's been really consistent at the seconds level, and you'd think that, they're happy to back him in and give him games early. Otherwise, they're going to be running the risk of losing him. The only issue is when Fisher gets himself right. I think they'll go with Fisher, Mackesy first, but looks like Mackessy's going to have a delayed start, so Worrell will probably be the man for at least the first 4 or 5 games, so I'm happy to back him in.
So here's to hold. Yeah, fair enough. That makes sense. I definitely one to watch there for me. When you look at their new draftees as well, I don't know if it's Raquel, however you say. Rochelle, sorry. 184k forward mid. So uber talented mid forward, blessed with goal kicking and belief in his own ability. Apparently he'll be pushing for selection in 2022. So this is all the general write-up anyway. Basically, disposals end up on the scoreboard directly or indirectly, and they reckon that he will be ahead of his other 2 draftees in Saligo, and Taylor.
And Taylor, for sure. Absolutely, for sure.
And the issue is that they're all 180 centimetres or below anyway, those 3. So generally, and the other 2 are mids.
Rochelle's massive Toby Green vibes here. And that, so one to definitely watch. I think he's going to be a really exciting player to watch. But when we're looking at other guys, like Pedler, as we said, has been in the system 123, Worrell's been in the system 123k. Am I going to pay up for a Rochelle who's coming in at, what is he, 184?
184, I don't like paying 180.
I don't like it. That's already like 19k more than Dylan Stevens, and that we're going to have question marks when we get to the Sydney pod about him and that. So I'm not willing to pay 184 for a small forward at Adelaide.
It's funny, we disregard they're too expensive, but then you think a couple of years ago, Rosie killed it at an expensive rookie price. I think even Smith as well. Isaac Smith, was it? No, Smith Bulldogs.
Bailey Smith, yeah.
Bailey Smith,
but the difference
I knew that was wrong.
And I know people
but
say
they were more
that.
expensive as well.
Yeah, for sure. But the difference is Bailey Smith's coming to a team which has got Bont McRae, premiership players around him. Port Adelaide, you're playing next to Robbie Gray, you've got Wines and that. Who's he playing with up in the forward line at Adelaide? Well, we know Tex is out for the first 4 or 6 weeks and that, so his forward line's so it's Fogarty and Thilthorpe as his sort of key targets that he's going to be roving off. I don't want a bar of anyone in that Adelaide forward line outside maybe Pedler just because of his price, but I'd rather a cheap Adelaide defender than a cheap Adelaide forward.
No, that makes sense. And look, I think that wraps up for Adelaide. So I know probably a little bit to talk about because they do have quite a few relevant players for the Standard League as well. And I think that wraps us up about it. I think probably a little too long on Adelaide, but nice way to start us off in the series anyway, Swiz.
Do you have anything, a statement or anything, a prediction about the Crows this year, mate? What's your thoughts on how they're going to go?
I think the Adelaide Crows will not disappoint. I don't have any outlandish statement on the Crows. I think Crows will be bottom 4. I think Dawson will put out a statement saying, oh shit.
Shit, what the fuck have I done?
What have I got into? No, I don't know. I do wish them well, but I think we kind of expect what we're getting with Adelaide.
No, fucking I hope they win the spoon.
Oh, outlandish. Matt Crouch plays 22. Is that outlandish?
That would be very outlandish.
Very, very, very. But yeah, look, that wraps us up for Adelaide in this series. So we'll go through alphabetical like we usually do, and Brisbane Lions will be next.
Fantastic.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
See ya.
Bye.